Hi, I'm Adam and welcome back to First Man Photography. In today's video, I want to share some tips with you and some struggles we may face when photographing trees as we attempt to demystify woodland photography. Before we get going today though, this video is sponsored by Lexar. If you need fast, reliable and high quality SD cards, look no further than Lexar. Right, it is beautifully foggy out there today, so let's not waste any more time in the studio and let's get out and about. Let's go. Often when I'm talking to other photographers and we are out and about in woodland, one of the things they say to me and why they struggle photographing trees and woodland is that they can't see the wood for the trees. And I get that because I feel like that as well sometimes. Woodland photography is hard, there's no doubt about it. I think the reason we feel like that and we say that is because we're trying to bring a 3D world down into a 2D image. And when we do that, we have to deal with form. In art, form is the 3D things in your scene. 2D is shape, form is 3D. So in a woodland, we are challenged with the form of the trees and how to arrange them into a composition that works, because they're conflicting. On a day like today, when it's really nice and misty, it becomes slightly easier because it simplifies it. It reduces some of that chaos that you have in your scene by essentially removing some of the background. So you've got your subject trees and the background sort of blends into the fog. It's exactly the same as how a portrait photograph works with a shallow depth of field. All the focus is on the subject, the person, as the background blows away, and it's the very similar thing, like I say, in woodland with fog. So I'm lucky that I've got fog today, but when I've struggled with woodland photography before, it's always been because I've been attracted to an individual tree and I've gone and shot it, and then I've got home feeling quite happy because I found a nice tree and I photographed it. But then when you see it on the big screen, I've always been thoroughly disappointed because it's just a very flat image. It's just full of tree, it's full of chaos, and I haven't really worked that form into an image in a way that tells a story. So what I always make sure I do when I'm exploring these woodlands is just to kind of allow your vision and your sight to be drawn to a particular area. For me, that happens, and what I'm always trying to do with my woodland photographs is with depth. Introducing depth into your woodland photographs is, I think, what really makes it work. Now the fog helps with that because it's reducing some of that background chaos. But also we can create depth with leading lines, or we create depth with light. People use paths a lot in woodland photography. I'm not a big fan of that because I want to have that natural feel to it. I want the story of my woodland photography to be that at any moment you might feel like a deer would walk through the scene, or an elf in some sort of fantasy movie. So having that man-made path in there kind of detracts from the story I'm trying to create with my woodland photography. I have the 70-200 on at the moment, and I'm zooming in on this sort of bunch of trees just here, which are in a little clearing, and there's some lovely light, and really it's that light in the foreground underneath the tree on that grass that kind of then leads us up into that image. And the separation I'm getting with the background because of the fog and those trees are just wonderful. And the beauty of having the long lens on there as well with woodland is you're not getting any of the sky in there, which really changes the luminance of the image, because bright areas of an image will draw attention, pull the attention away from the subject. Trying to eliminate the sky from your frame, looking around the edge of your frame, will stop that luminance being introduced at the top where you don't want the attention. So you can sort of push all the attention back on to the subject of your scene. You could do that as well with a gradient, but sometimes that can start looking a bit unrealistic. So I've gone for the long lens, I'm zoomed in, and then I've got some lovely forms of this tree in the middle there, kind of coming off that. I'm just going to wait for a moment when there's not much wind, which is about now. I'm at f11, a third of a second, just because of it's a bit dark still. And then ISO 100, and that's giving me a really nice exposure. I'm really happy with that. Even just on the back of the screen, it's looking fantastic. It's hopefully not going to take too much editing. I may draw a grading up from the bottom just to help us go through that frame, help with that depth, help with that creating that kind of visual pathway through the scene. Like I say, it's all about introducing that depth. And with this one, I feel like I've done that. So I'm happy. See what you think. So as you know, this video is sponsored by Lexar. I have been using Lexar cards for many, many years because they are fast, they are reliable, and they are high quality, and they have never let me down. Even when I dropped my camera in the water in Wales, the card came out, it was wet, but it was absolutely fine, and I recovered all my files, no problem at all, and continued to use that card for a long time after that. In this camera at the moment, recording this 4K footage, is the Lexar 2000X SD card. There's another one in my main camera over there as well. This has a read speed of 300 megabytes a second, a write speed of 260 megabytes a second, so it's great for all your 4K footage, fast burst rate stills, and pretty much anything else you can think of. So hit that link down below to check out Lexar cards and give them some love for sponsoring this channel, and perfect if you have a new camera for Christmas. So I'm heading now to a little tree I found earlier. Well, it's actually quite a big tree, and it's covered in moss, and it's just got that lovely mystical fantasy feel about it that I love. It means I've got to trek across this pretty exposed moor at the moment, and it's started to rain, and it's icy cold. Whew. It's getting right in my face. Quite windy as well, so it's sort of battering me. So I'm just marching across to try and get back into the shelter of the wood. It's kind of difficult conditions, but I love it. It's one of those days where I just feel the effort's really going to pay off. I'm in the woods now and feel like I should whisper, but I do enjoy it when you get these kind of little trees here that resiliently cling on to their autumnal leaves, and they do make nice subjects for composition as well. In this case though, I can't really use that, I don't think, because I can't create that depth. I could go lower, but there's just no way to create that depth because there's kind of a hill behind it. So just appreciate looking at it, I think, and move on. Right now is a good example of what I find difficult with woodland photography, because I am pretty deep in this wood now, and as you can see all the way around, there are some seriously interesting trees. Probably where I'm stood at the moment is in a little small clearing, if you look up, and it's quite bright. So then when I look back in, I don't have that pathway for my vision that I'm talking about. So despite all these beautiful moss-covered trees, there's not really a composition jumping out at me. Like this tree here, look, that arm of that branch is just so interesting, but the busyness and the chaos underneath it just makes a good image almost impossible. And I think that's probably something worth thinking about, is that there isn't always an image. There just isn't. Yeah, don't be put off. And also having a good explore around and walking in different directions will sometimes do the trick, and you'll stumble across that scene that you know has to be photographed. Let's hope that happens for me. It might do, but it might not either, and that's okay. Right, I'm set up for another shot because I think I have found something, and it is actually starting to rain quite heavily now, even though we've still got a nice bit of fog. I have found this tree here, which, when you look at the base of it, is not that interesting, but what I try to do in woodland is also look up, and the branches about 6 meters off the ground are just covered in moss, and they look beautiful. And then the shape of it is mirrored or matched by that next tree, and the forms they are creating are so interesting. And I think I'm managing to create a little bit of depth to the image because of that fog, but mostly because of the way the light is catching it and then reflecting off it, because it's wet and it's covered in little droplets that are just sending that light straight back into the lens of my camera, and it's just looking fantastic. So I'm kind of trying to fill my frame with as much of that as possible. I mentioned earlier that having the sky in it is difficult, and there is some sky in this image, but because of the way the light's reflecting off that moss and that water, it actually makes sense to the image, because the rest of it is actually quite dark So it's creating that ethereal, that mystical, that fantasy movie type mood that I love in my woodland photography. So I'm using the 70-200. No, I'm not. Why can't I think with what lens it is? It's a 24-70. And I'm zoomed in to about 60mm because I'm trying to fill the frame with these two knotty branches as much as possible, but I kind of want them to be in a little bit of context. So it's not just about the shape of them. Still see some of the misty woodland behind. And I've got those bigger, I think they're pine trees up there, which are actually creating the background for my image as the camera is sort of pointing up. Then I've got sort of the technical challenge to think about, and really it's quite simple. I'm at f16 because the tree closest to me is actually quite a lot closer to me than the one behind it. And because I'm zoomed in on the camera, if I don't go to f16, it's putting that back tree out of focus a little bit, which I don't want. That happened at f11, so I'm using f16, which is going to be totally fine. I'm then at ISO 100. I'm at 1 second, which is okay as well because there isn't really any trees moving around in my scene. I'm in the woods now. It's much more sheltered and it's actually, well, it's a lot less windy. And anyway, there's no little branches in the image anyway. It's all these big, thick ones that are going to be less affected by the wind. I've then just been playing around with the focal length a bit. I'm really happy with the perspective I've got from this position because it's kind of, it's like mirroring those curves, and that's what it's about for me. Nicely balancing this image out and then creating some depth as well. So I'm just going to shoot it. 2 second timer, it exposes for 1 second, and the form of those trees and the kind of arch they're taking is just so beautiful. And with that mist behind it, I reckon that is going to be a really beautiful image, which I will show you in a minute. But if you've enjoyed the video, please press that like button as gently as you possibly can. Yeah, give Lexar some love. Check out all my other stuff, books, raw room, that kind of thing, if you want to learn photography from me. I've got one more video this year, the 30th, and then we'll be going into the new year and with lots of new plans. So make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye.